The opinions expressed on this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Cable 14, its sponsors, or its shareholders, Cogeco Cable, Shaw Cable, and Source Cable Limited.
Welcome to the O Show. I'm Laura Babcock, and we're joined as always with Loren Lieberman. Hi, Loren. We'll say hi to you a bit more in a moment, but first let's look at what's coming up on the show. There's lots going on in town, so as usual, it was a tough time picking which topics we would cover, but here are the important ones as we see it on the O Show. We're going to talk about a possible property tax increase to pay for discretionary benefits for people in our city who are on social services. This may affect you, and there's a big meeting at City Council tomorrow morning to discuss it, so we'll get into all of that and what that means for you. Also, we're going to talk about how the city is treating the Bulldogs. What is going on? They win the Calder Cup for us, and now they might not be able to get a lease. We're going to get into that. Plus, we're going to talk about the Tivoli. Is the Phoenix going to rise from the ashes? We have, of course, a Tivoli expert here in the man of Loren Lieberman, so we'll find out all about the latest on that. Plus, a whole bunch more coming up, including updates on some important topics we've been following. But first, let's say hi to Loren.
How are you, Laura?
I'm good, thank you. Had a nice weekend in Ottawa. Very nice.
Good
Long
stuff.
Delayed trip on the way home, but had a good time with the family. How about you?
Away as well, and it's always great to come home.
You still can't tell us that secret location you keep jetting off to?
It's not appropriate.
Okay, because you know you've been sending me pictures and I haven't posted them because people would figure it out, you know.
Yeah.
Trying to use some discretion.
It's a little warmer where I keep going, that's all.
Yes, I'm very jealous. Okay. Let's talk about some of the updates on things that are happening.
Right.
Last week we talked about building permits, as you recall, Loren. We talked about the fact that it was a record year for the city. And I put out some questions regarding, you know, were some of the bigger taxpayer projects like the Downtown Health Centre, like the stadium, factored into that record first 3 quarters that we'd had. I have since heard back from the city. They were kind enough to send us some facts and some charts and to let us know that neither of those 2 projects have been factored in yet. So that's an important thing for our viewers to understand.
Why have they not been factored in? Are they not happening?
No, just because of the permit not being... Well, according to the email I received from Michael Marini, thank you, Michael, the permits haven't been finalized yet, but I didn't get a sense there's going to be a problem there, Lord. There are enough issues going on in town without us getting into that one.
Stadium is happening, false
alarm.
Yeah,
and another topic we didn't really get, we're not going to really spend a lot of time on today, but I think it's a good one. I want to give a quick shout out to Councillor Ferguson, is the issue with, speaking of permits, the permits around road closures, the one at Hess Village, other ones that are happening in town. I know that I just was delayed getting here because of a road closure on a ramp that's taking place. He's asking that when people get these permits, that there is some sort of a time frame on that. What do you think about that?
I got trapped today also. I don't think that was a road closure though on the highway. That looked like an accident. Sure, notification is certainly necessary, and limiting the obstruction on the public is always preferred. Sure.
Well, because some projects might be going on indefinitely, right? They might stall because of financing or something.
Dundurn in Aberdeen has had 1 lane through that entire construction process.
And Queen Street in Maine?
Right, and the difference is at Dundurn in Aberdeen, at least that project is happening.
Well, I think it's a great move. Anything that can make transportation easier. A lot of talk today about transportation, of course. But we're not going to focus on that because I think there are some bigger stories going on. One of them is about poverty and about taxpayers maybe having to ante up, and that could mean you. Loren, let's get the facts on this.
Absolutely. Taxing turmoil. Council considering a 1% property tax increase to make up for the provincial downloading of discretionary benefits. Benefits to those on social services include cribs, eyeglasses, funerals, and much more. Meeting at City Hall tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. It is open to the public.
So this is something that we've talked about a fair bit. As you know, Loren, one of the decisions in the McGuinty austerity plan was to stop providing funding for municipalities to take care of what they call discretionary benefits.
Right.
And as you can see by that list there, I don't consider the dignity of a burial, of a funeral as being discretionary, nor do I think cribs are for people in social services, nor do I think eyeglasses are. So I think it's a misnomer, and I think it's pretty cynical. And our city council has, this is, I believe, the second emergency type meeting on this issue, a really aggressive response because they have to fill this gap, this shortage gap, very quickly. Or people who are making, $5.99 a year might go up to, or a month might go up to $6.99 on social services. I can't imagine living on either of those numbers, but to lose the benefits on top of it, I support City Council in this. What do you think?
I think it's a good move that City Council and all City Councils have been complaining, have been putting the notion out there that the provincial downloading is unfair. And I don't think it's really hitting home the way it should until you put, like they have just here, it's a 1% increase on your property taxes. And that's courtesy of Dalton. And that's something people can equate to. We've always been hearing about downloading, but now something was eliminated and we have to pay. It's pointing the finger in the right direction. And I don't think we need to get, this 1% is to offset that. That's right. We're in budget time. We're not talking about just a 1% increase.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the bigger picture because as you know that Hamilton and only London were in this province last year able to have a 0% tax increase. And I think I said at the time, or maybe it was a little bit higher than 0, but it was very, very low.
Right.
And
nominal.
I think I said at the time, kudos to you, but I don't think anybody expects that. I think we understand that, especially with inflation and with the fact that there are services that we have to pay for it, and although a property tax increase is very difficult, especially for people in our community that don't make a lot of money, this one measure might, 1% might mean $30 more a year. I think we have to do it, not just on this issue, but on other things that we need.
And I think it's good messaging for the city to point the finger and say this amount of your increase is courtesy of such and such cutback. And then as long as we can absorb all of that, if we do have a higher number in this year's municipal budget for a tax increase on our property tax, then we know why.
And that's one of the things they're considering, is saying this increase is brought to you by McGuinty, if it gets that far. But the prorogation of, as you know, of Parliament at Queen's Park made it so that the scheduled Hamilton Day to go and lobby for these benefits to be covered couldn't happen. So, the community, the poverty activists in this community have been really, working on the fly here with council. The situation's changing so dramatically, but we have our most vulnerable who need these benefits, and they need them filled now.
I'm not sure the result would be any different if the legislature was sitting or if they're prorogued.
But you know how hard it is to change tactics quickly.
I get that, but a delegation of poverty advocates from Hamilton wasn't going to affect change province-wide.
Well, I did hear the story about Vic Copps once chaining himself to a tree at Queen's Park to make sure that Hamilton was heard.
Different man, different time, different place.
Right,
yeah,
that's right. The city was going to take a respectful approach, but allowed one, and now that's changed. So this is where we stand. There's a meeting tomorrow morning. It's been tweeted to me that it's open to the public. If you're supportive or not of council making this decision to put a 1% increase on your property taxes to pay for this, show up at City Hall. Exercise your democracy. Okay, but we're clearly both in support of it.
Yep.
Let's move on to the next thing that we want to talk about, and that is our Bulldogs. And you've pardon the pun on this one, but Bruiser, of course, being the Bulldogs mascot. It seems like the Bulldogs themselves are getting kind of bruised here. Let's hear only the facts, Loren.
Absolutely. Well, according to The Spectator, Bulldogs owner is frustrated by the delay in the re-signing of the lease for Copps Coliseum and confused about who is in charge of negotiation. Is it the city, is it HECFI, or is it now Global Spectrum? Global Spectrum takes control of Copps in the new year, announced Erie Otters may enter the bidding war for the lease.
So, Loren, of course, you have some engagement, not with Copps Coliseum, but you were part of a successful bid to take the convention center business with Carmen.
So, and the transition is weird.
Yeah,
it's
well, tell me about it, because have you been facing any kind of, so there's a couple things going on. One is, how are we treating our successful AHL team here? Is it even fair? And B, is this part of the product of an unsuccessful transition that's going on?
Well, I wouldn't say it's an unsuccessful transition. It is just a transition at this point. And it's not reasonable. First of all, HECFI is controlled by its board, and its board was all relieved of their duties and now is the City of Hamilton. Its council is the board for HECFI. So it's kind of the city and HECFI is one and the same. But it's not really reasonable for the outgoing regime to be making long-term decisions for the incoming regime. That's an entirely separate notion from Michael Andlauer, who's been a great guy and a wonderful owner for our AHL team for years. So that's the juxtaposition here, that what is fair and reasonable for Global Spectrum moving forward is not really respectful for Michael Andlauer based on historical.
So this is a process that Michael had been trying to get a lease signed for 16 months now, as I read Dressel's column. And he needs it signed, of course, to maintain his successful franchise rights in the AHL. Do you think it's, so taking aside the transition and the fact that, you know, maybe council's in a bit of a tough position. The mayor wanted to put through a motion to get that lease expedited, and then after going in camera came out and said, no, we've got to hold off because of the factors you just cited. But so taking that aside, that transitions are messy and difficult, and you know, people who are moving out of, let's say, HECFI or the Convention Center, Copps Coliseum, can't commit to long-term things. They can also jeopardize the momentum of the next group coming in. It's difficult. Given all of that, is it fundamentally sending a terrible message when we want an NHL franchise here so badly, when we treat somebody who has had a successful franchise for hockey this way?
Yeah, well, I think there's a big distinction here that Global Spectrum, as the new landlord, what Michael Andlauer has done for the city doesn't really have any currency with Global Spectrum. They are a private business who are trying to do what is best for their business under the terms of their lease agreement. And if the Erie Otters put forth a lease agreement that is more favorable, that is going to make their shareholders happier, then that has to be the way you go, because history doesn't pay the bills.
So isn't this a fact then of privatization? We talked last week on the show about private naming rights of things. This was a move where Hamilton actually outsourced and privatized some of its major pieces of its entertainment.
But you got to take that one step further down the road and suggest that if the Erie Otters do provide financial benefit to Global Spectrum, then that also takes the ball down the field and says there's less burden on the taxpayer by a decrease in terms of the subsidy to keep Copps Coliseum
But what it
running.
does is it takes out the ability for council to react on kind of an emotional outrage level from the community, right? Once we privatize things, they cede control to a certain extent over these kind of decisions. So will this be, is this a harbinger of things to come? Does people in Hamilton have to get used to the fact that privatization might mean better bottom line but less control?
I don't think that's anything but a fact, and if it makes you wince in a situation like this, consider that decisions like this will be made in terms of the privatization of HECFI across the board, but it's helping you as the taxpayer.
And this is a message that the new people, Global Spectrum running Copps, are going to have to communicate, right? And councillors are going to have to reinforce, because there was a whole lot of anger and frustration out there on social media when I asked people on Facebook and Twitter what do they want to talk about on the O Show. They're pretty upset about this.
But before we move on, there has been far too much chatter for the last couple of years about Michael Andlauer moving the team to Laval, as he is a part owner of the Montreal Canadiens, and Laval is getting a new arena. And you know, I'm not sure we're getting, and I don't mean to disrespect Michael Andlauer. He's been a wonderful owner and a great corporate citizen for our region. I'm not sure that we have all the answers to all the equations. And anybody who suggests that an OHL and AHL team can coexist, the revenue streams just don't make sense. Yes, they could both, but you both couldn't be the primary.
And it's probably also the same ticket purchaser as well. And when you look at the fact that it took a lot to sell out Copps, it had to be sort of a seventh game in a Calder Cup to get the place packed for the Bulldogs, who are champions. It really speaks to how much of an appetite or how much money we have for hockey in this community. Okay, let's move on to something else that has been privately owned, publicly funded, a big, huge mess in many ways. In fact, when I first got to know about Loren Lieberman, it was because you were vocal, if I can put that nicely, about the Tivoli. So give us the facts on what's happening now. I know this is a passion for you.
Absolutely. The Tivoli Theatre on James Street North is a heritage building in a state of disrepair. Current owners purchased the Tivoli for $1. The city has put over $100,000 into its repair. CBC Hamilton has learned there may be several new buyers interested.
So tell us a little bit about the current tenant, if you can, and what's really going on from your perspective.
So the Tivoli had a partial collapse in 2004. The Tivoli Theatre was, during its collapse, was given from the Snydermans to the city to control in terms of the partial demolition and the rest of it. Snydermans walked away from the building and conversely walked away from the massive cleanup bill of the demolition. The city made a unrelated two-part deal of which the Snydermans would be forgiven for their cleanup bill, and simultaneously the Snydermans would donate the Tivoli Theatre to a dollar to Belma Diamante.
I know we saw you just there because you were the man of the hour on Tivoli.
I was the tenant.
Back in the day, yeah.
Back in the day, before James Street North was cool, before anybody cared, we brought 50,000 ticket-paying, parking, restaurant-filling customers down there.
I even went one night to your theatre. I forget which play.
It was absolutely positively a going concern,
Yeah.
and that was a cool building. Separate from any conversations we had about the merits of the building, this is a scandalous situation that occurred in 2005 by your tax dollars flying out the window so that the former mayor could hand this building, which is essentially half of a city block, to a preferred supporter who has in turn, since 2005 and 7+ years, done nothing except receive municipal money, enough money
loans, yeah.
that would have way more than just interest-free loans, and that money would have kept the Tivoli from ever having disrepair in the first place.
So two things here. One is, what was scandalous, and I think you're talking about Mayor Deanny, because I know that you and him often come to verbal blows about this still. So let's point to which mayor we're talking about.
Yep.
What was scandalous about it first, Loren, and secondly, I might have underestimated over $100,000 going to the Tivoli. Where's the money going, if not to the repair of the building?
Hundreds of thousands of dollars was forgiven on the Snydermans pending the transfer of this. So that's the largest line item to begin with. Interest-free loans for stabilization, money for putting in the parquet. There's been a lot of money.
So where's it going, if not to the theatre? Are you making an allegation here that there's something inappropriate?
Oh, not at all.
Okay.
But no. But so you've got a really crappy parkland where there once was a lobby. I don't think that's good use of my tax dollars.
So what was scandalous about it?
What's scandalous is when the city, for all intents and purposes, takes over a building and doesn't have a public process, an RFP tenders, and just decides, and of course they didn't. The city never owned the building. It was just orchestrated by the city. We'll make this go away should this also happen.
Okay.
So it is all legal and kosher. But the main thing is that buildings do not provide artistic culture.
But didn't the people who purchased it, aren't they an artistic group?
Yeah, but they're not using it, and it's full of mold, and it's ridiculous, and it should either come down or be taken away from its current owners for somebody who will actually do something
And it
there.
sounds as though there might be some options on the table for this, that people have approached to see if they could purchase it.
Well, it's my understanding that Belma is not interested in selling it because she has an entire dollar invested in it and is looking for a greater return than the offers that she's currently receiving on it.
Okay, well, we'll keep tracking this. Loren, I can't believe we're talking about the Tivoli again after all this time. Okay, and let's get to our last topic, but first let me thank our sponsors who help us out here on the O Show. We've got, of course, Pennington's, that provides great wardrobe for me and jewelry, thank you, and Madison Avenue Salon and Spa. I love going to Reno's every Tuesday because it's always packed with all the movers and shakers in town. So
I was hanging with Reno last night.
It's always great political talk there at Madison Avenue. I love it. Okay, let's talk about something else, an update on a story that we've been updating you on, and that is, of course, the OMB, Ontario Municipal Board Challenge, happening with Lynwood Charlton. There was new developments this week. Loren, what are the facts?
Sure. The OMB ruling, city's refusal of Lynwood Charlton's request to move the home for girls with mental disability to Corktown being challenged at the OMB. Ontario Municipal Board ruled against the city's attempt to keep Ontario Human Rights Board from having standing at the hearing. Issues have garnered national attention for both OHC role and local SOS campaign in support of the girls.
So this is, as we announced last week, now a national story. The National Post saying that the Ontario Human Rights Commission had no place in this, but that was ruled, of course, in favor of the Ontario Human Rights Commission this week. So they will have standing at those hearings. And there was, as I mentioned, the Huffington Post piece about the plight of the girls and the community grassroots SOS campaign. So this ruling essentially, Loren, some people are saying it's not a surprise, but what it does do is say that there's some merit to the human rights argument if the Human Rights Commission can be at the table, no?
Yes, you're absolutely right. And I think there's only one word to comment on this ongoing story. It's like, it's enough already. Just compromise. There is a compromise to be had here. And why everybody has dug in so far when both sides understand at least partially the other side's perspective.
Yes.
I don't get it at all.
I agree, and I hope that council can find this compromise before this gets even more national headlines for Hamilton.
Right, it's not good for us.
Of course, I'm on the side of thinking that it's not good for the girls either. And in fact, somebody from McMaster just asked me today if they can sell shirts at their student centre there, the SOS shirts, and I'm going to deliver them this week.
Perfect.
So it's not going away. People need to show their support, or even as you and I are both saying here, support council finding some sort of a resolution with Lynwood Charlton before this gets even uglier at the national level, because it's already started. Okay, let's end on a positive note, and that is our Way to Goes. Way to go Environment Hamilton for their report that came out today on E. coli levels in Red Hill Creek. The city is going to try to figure out what are those rogue sewer connections that are causing the levels to be so high, but good work on them for watching that water.
Way to go to the population of Hamilton for, in my opinion at least, a much increased presence of poppies on the lapel.
And I feel very badly, actually. My husband bought me a poppy to wear on the show today, and I forgot to put it on.
I'm sorry, I got another one in the car.
No, I have one. You know what? He bought one for you too. But
wear the poppy and way to go to our vets.
Absolutely. I support the veterans 100%. To City Council for taking emergency action to help the city's most vulnerable. They've really mobilized in the last 2 weeks around these discretionary benefits. We criticize them a lot, but this is something they've done very well, so way to go.
Way to go to our American neighbors for making the right choice tonight.
Obama is going to win.
Romney for the win. And you know what the real way to go on this is? We should all take a lesson from our neighbors to the south. They come out in droves to vote. Although somebody told me on Twitter yesterday that we have a higher voter turnout than them. They just have longer lines because of terrible polling stations. That is entirely not true. So I posted something that had the top 40 countries in the world that have more democracy or turnout than the U.S. I'll check and see if we're on the list. But to your point, way to go. I'm glad people are voting. I'm glad they're going to vote for Obama. Are we talking about eligible voters? Oh, yes. I forgot about that big voter fraud of 0.002%. Okay. Yeah. So Obama's going to win, and next week I'll tell everybody why Loren owes me money. Let's make a bet. Okay. Let's end off with the tweet of the week. And this is something I got from the Ontario Human Rights Commission when they saw the coverage about Lynwood Charlton here locally. Have a great week. Obama.